Her fingers hovered tremblingly over the controls, reluctant to stop the faint crackle of voices and footsteps preserved on the tape. It was a fragile tether, a thread binding her to a reality that was slipping away like sand through desperate fingers. Outside, the tide whispered with unnatural intent, the waves folding over themselves with a sinister rhythm that seemed to pulse from the island's very heart. Marcus had been the first to vanish in plain sight. One moment he was near the shoreline, mapping the jagged rocks that seemed to rearrange themselves even as he marked them down. The next, a low fog had rolled in so thick it swallowed sound and form alike. Evelyn remembered the wild panic in his eyes, the way his lips parted as if to call out his own name, and then nothing. No scream, no echo, no trace left behind. It was as if the island had reached out with invisible hands and plucked him clean from existence, erasing every sign that he had ever been there. She pressed the replay button again, the tape's hiss filling the cramped room. Lena's soft voice came through, whispering words Evelyn could barely catch, ancient syllables that seemed to resist the silence. Lena had found a way to slow the erasure, naming. But even naming was a fragile shield against a force that consumed histories and identities with indifferent hunger. Outside, Captain Jonas Reed stood motionless at the edge of the camp, staring out at the dark horizon where Marcus should have been. His face, weather-beaten and stern, betrayed a grief he refused to voice. The pragmatic man who had kept the team grounded now wrestled with an impossible truth. The island was not just a place, but a sentient force that erased, devoured, and forgot. The loss was not only physical, but existential. Evelyn's gaze drifted to Dr. Ortiz, who sat slumped against the wall, his sharp mind unraveling in the face of something science could not explain. His skepticism had crumbled, replaced by a hollow terror that gnawed at his reason. The island's silence was no longer just the absence of sound, but the obliteration of being. In the dimming light, Lena knelt by the dirt outside, her pale fingers tracing shapes she struggled to name before the silence could swallow them. Her eyes, wide and haunted, caught Evelyn's for a brief moment, a silent plea for connection, for remembrance, for survival. The island's tide was rising, threatening to sweep away the last fragments of their identities. Evelyn forced herself to stand, clutching the recorder like a lifeline. "We have to hold on," she whispered to the empty room, "or we'll be lost too." But as the shadows deepened and the silence thickened, the question lingered. How do you fight to exist when the very fabric of your being is being unraveled? The night crept closer, the island preparing to vanish once more into the void it had always inhabited. And with it, the last memories of those who dared to step onto its shores would slip away, forgotten like names erased from a page smeared by relentless tides. Evelyn's voice cracked as she spoke into the recorder one final time. "If anyone finds this, remember us. Remember that we were here." The wind carried the words out into the creeping fog, swallowed instantly by the silence that claimed them all. The edge of forgetting was not a place, but a moment, and that moment had come. The island's core was shrouded in a dense mist, curling and twisting like the tendrils of forgotten memories. Every step she took was muffled by the thick fog, the ground beneath her feet pulsing faintly as though breathing, alive with a slow, sinister rhythm. Her breath came in shallow gasps, heart hammering with a mixture of dread and stubborn resolve. Evelyn's fingers trembled slightly as she clutched the worn, leather-bound journal, the pages inside filled with her obsessive notes and accounts of the island's slow erasure. The creeping silence had swallowed so much already: names, faces, histories, and yet here. In this liminal heart of the island, she sensed the presence of something far older, far more terrible than mere natural phenomena. The whispers began as barely audible murmurs, curling around her like ghostly fingers. They were fragments of language, lost words, and half-remembered names, an elegy for the forgotten. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, steeling herself. "I am Dr. Evelyn Hart," she whispered aloud, her voice trembling but clear. "We seek understanding, not destruction." Out of the fog, spectral silhouettes emerged, shapes half-formed, flickering like fragile memories struggling to maintain form. They hovered along the shoreline beyond the mist, their outlines blurred and ghostly. These were the echoes of those who had been consumed by the island's relentless tide of oblivion, lost souls whose histories had been erased from time. Their silent presence pressed on Evelyn's heart, an aching sorrow that threatened to unravel her resolve. Behind her, faint footsteps approached. Marcus and Lena had followed, their faces pale and drawn, eyes wide with a mixture of hope and terror. Marcus's usual bravado was gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability that mirrored Evelyn's own. Lena clutched a small collection of artifacts, fragments of language and culture she had painstakingly pieced together, hoping to anchor their identities against the island's erasure. "Evelyn," Marcus whispered, voice cracking, "are you sure this is the right way? What if the island, it's more than we can handle?" She met his gaze, dark eyes fierce despite the exhaustion. "We have no choice. We need to know what it is, why it exists. If we can't understand it, we can't fight it." The mist thickened, swallowing the edges of the landscape, the islands seeming to breathe around them. A low hum vibrated through the earth, a pulse that synchronized with the rising tide not of water, but of silence itself. Evelyn stepped forward, raising her voice in a trembling chant of names. Words Lena had taught her, fragments of a lost language that seemed to slow the erasure, if only briefly. As she spoke, the island responded. The ground beneath her feet shifted subtly, the fog swirling faster, coalescing into shapes that hinted at history and memory. The whispers grew louder, no longer just echoes, but a chorus of voices, ancient, mournful, warning. The island was a manifestation of forgotten peoples, a place born outside the flow of time and memory, a repository for those the world had abandoned and erased. Suddenly, a surge of the tide swept over the island's edge. The water was black and still, swallowing footprints and whispered words alike. The spectral figures flickered violently, their forms distorting as if struggling against an invisible current. Evelyn felt a wave of vertigo, the edges of her vision blurring as the island's power pressed inward, threatening to pull her under. "Hold on to who you are," she murmured fiercely, gripping the journal tightly. "Remember your names. Remember everything." Captain Jonas Reed appeared then, his rugged face etched with grim determination. "Evelyn, we can't hold this any longer. The tide's turning against us." Dr. Ortiz stood beside him, eyes wide behind his glasses, the skepticism that had once shielded him now eroding under the weight of fear. "What does it want from us?" Evelyn swallowed hard, the terrifying truth settling like cold salt water in her chest. "To erase us all, to preserve its silence. But if we can confront it, if I can reach whatever's left inside, we might find a way to save what's left of us, or at least understand what we're facing." The island's fog closed in, the spectral silhouettes reaching out in silent lament. Evelyn felt the pull of oblivion, the seductive promise of nothingness that erased pain but also erased being itself. She took a deep breath, stepping further into the mist, her voice rising in a defiant chanter, lifeline cast into the swallowing silence. The air shimmered, the island's sentience stirring as if waking from a long dream. In that moment, Evelyn glimpsed the horror beneath the beauty, the centuries of lost lives, erased histories, and forgotten names that gave birth to this place. The reckoning had come, and with it, the final choice between surrender and sacrifice. As the tide rolled inward once more, she called out to her team, her voice steady despite the quake in her heart. Hold fast. Remember who you are. We fight for our names, for our stories. We fight for the silence to be broken. Beyond the mist, the island waited, patient and eternal, a sentinel of oblivion. And Evelyn Hart, lead scientist and survivor, stood on the precipice of a truth no map could chart, a truth that would decide not just their fate, but the fate of memory itself. The silence deepened, but within it, a spark flickered, fragile, defiant, and unyielding. Dr. Evelyn Hart stood at the jagged edge where salt water met earth, the cold biting at her exposed skin despite the heavy jacket she wore. The sea was a glassy abyss, swallowing light and sound, the silence around her profound and suffocating. Above, the moon, obscured by moving clouds, cast a pale, uncertain glow that shimmered on the creeping mist. Behind her, the remnants of their camp lay scattered, half-forgotten equipment, discarded notes, and the whispers of lives slowly slipping away. The island was winning. Its erasure was no longer a creeping threat, but an overwhelming tide, consuming not just their memories, but their very existence. Evelyn's breath came in shallow bursts, each exhale a visible ghost swallowed by the cold air. She turned to look back at the others, Lina, Marcus, Captain Reed, and Dr. Ortiz, all caught in the same battle for identity and survival. The once confident team was fractured, their minds frayed by the island's relentless assault. Lina knelt beside the flickering remains of their makeshift fire, whispering words from the lost language she had painstakingly pieced together. Her fingers trembled as she traced symbols in the dirt, invoking names and shapes that seemed to push back the silence, if only briefly. "We have to hold on," Lina said, her voice barely above her breath. "Naming is our shield." Marcus paced near the shoreline, his leather jacket damp and torn from his desperate trek through the island's shifting terrain. His eyes were wide with guilt and panic, haunted by the near-fatal misstep that had almost cost him his life. "This place, it's changing faster than we can keep up," he muttered, voice cracking. "If we lose everything, what's the point?" Captain Reed stood rigid, his rugged face etched with worry but his stance steady. "We'll find a way. We have to." Dr. Ortiz, ever the skeptic, had grown silent, his thin frame slumped as though the weight of doubt had finally crushed him. Even his sharp mind had begun to unravel under the island's insidious influence. Evelyn's gaze drifted back to the dark waters swirling before her. The island was more than land, it was a living force, a sentient entity born from forgotten histories and erased identities. It consumed to preserve its silence, a paradox that defied all scientific understanding, and now it demanded a price. "There's only one way," Evelyn said quietly, turning to face the group. I have to give myself to it, to anchor what remains." The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Marcus's eyes widened. "No, Evelyn, there has to be another way." She shook her head, her dark hair falling loose around her face, eyes burning with a fierce determination. "If I don't, we'll all be lost. The island will erase us completely. But if I do, the island might hold back, preserve fragments of us memories, names, identity." Lina reached out, her pale hand trembling as she grasped Evelyn's arm. "You're our anchor. Without you, we drift into oblivion." Evelyn swallowed hard, the weight of past failures pressing down on her, the lost mentor, the expeditions that ended in silence and disappearance. This was her reckoning. With measured steps, she approached the water's edge. The fog thickened, curling around her like a living thing, swallowing sound and light. From within the mist, spectral shapes, flickered faces, and forms of those forgotten by time. Their eyes empty voids, reflecting the endless silence. Evelyn lifted her voice, steady and clear, speaking the words Lena had taught her, names long buried beneath centuries of loss. She offered herself to the island's silence, a sacrifice to hold back the tide of erasure. The fog coiled tighter, the spectral forms reaching out like desperate hands. Her body felt weightless, the world dimming at the edges. Yet inside, a fierce spark remained hope, memory, identity flickering against the encroaching dark. Back at the camp, the others felt the shift. The oppressive silence eased, just enough to breathe, to remember. Lena's whispered names grew stronger, Marcus's frantic energy tempered by a fragile calm, Captain Reed's steady hand guiding them through the fading night. But the cost was clear. Evelyn was gone, swallowed by the island's depths, her sacrifice the fragile anchor holding their fading existence together. As the tide receded, the island seemed to pause, as if contemplating its next move. The survivors clung to the fragile threads of memory and identity, aware that their struggle was far from over. In the silence that followed, the island whispered, promise and a threat that oblivion was patient, and the cycle of erasure would continue. Evelyn's last words echoed in their minds, a haunting refrain that would carry them forward. Remember us, before the silence claims all. The night held its breath, waiting for the dawn that might never come. The story did not end here. It was only another beginning, a fragile stand against the inevitable. And in that stand lay the last, flickering hope of survival. But as the island's tide whispered ever closer, the question remained, how long could memory withstand the salt and the silence? The island waited, and the silence deepened. Evelyn's heart sat hunched against the gnarled trunk of a dying tree, the battered notebook pressed tightly to her chest, as if it were a talisman against the creeping void. Her breath came shallow and uneven, each inhale a tremulous thread weaving her to the fraying edges of reality. Around her, the remnants of the expedition were scattered equipment half buried in shifting sands, tents sagging under the oppressive fog, and the faintest trace of footsteps fading into the earth like whispered secrets lost to time. She lifted the notebook, its pages a fragile mosaic of observations, sketches, and hastily scribbled notes. The ink had begun to smear, the words bleeding into one another like memories dissolving into forgetfulness. Yet within those pages lay the last bastion of their existence, a fragile archive against the island's relentless erasure. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she traced a familiar sentence, the words anchoring her to a past that was slipping away. From the edge of the clearing came a whisper, soft and tentative, threading through the silence with a fragile resilience. Lena Carr emerged from the fog, her pale face partially obscured by the light strands of hair that clung to her cheeks. She moved with deliberate care, the weight of anxiety etched into her every step. In her hands, she held a small collection of notes, fragments of a language lost to time, a key to the island's silent enigma. Evelyn, Lena's voice rose barely above a breath, a fragile thread woven from determination and despair. I've been repeating the words again and again. It's the only way I can hold on. Naming the island, the trees, even the silence itself. It's like we're fighting the tide with language. Evelyn nodded, her eyes reflecting a mixture of sorrow and resolve. I've been recording everything, she whispered, but it feels like the island is swallowing the very essence of us. Our memories, our voices, even our names. The two women sat together beneath the heavy sky, their shared presence a fleeting beacon in the encroaching darkness. They spoke in hushed tones, the cadence of their voices weaving fragile anchors against the abyss. Lena recited the lost words she had painstakingly pieced together, and Evelyn responded with fragments of her notes, their dialogue a fragile bridge spanning the gulf of forgetting. As the fog thickened, swallowing the edges of the camp, Evelyn felt the boundaries of her own identity blur. Faces of her colleagues flickered like shadows in her mind, names dissolving into silence. The weight of her past, the mentor she had lost, the failures that haunted her felt both distant and unbearably close, entwined with the island's malevolent will. "Do you remember your name?" Lena asked suddenly, her voice trembling. Evelyn paused, the question striking deep. "I think so," she replied uncertainly, clutching the notebook tighter, "but it feels like it could vanish at any moment." Outside their fragile sanctuary, the island's shoreline began to melt into mist. Spectral figures flickered at the water's edge, ghostly silhouettes of forgotten souls swallowed by the tides of oblivion. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating, erasing sound and substance alike. Lena's gaze fixed on the horizon. "If we disappear," she said softly, "will anyone remember us? Or will we become just another forgotten name, lost in the salt and the silence?" Evelyn reached out, taking Lena's hand in hers. "Maybe that's all we can do. Nor remember each other, hold on to the fragments before they slip away." They sat together as the last light drained from the sky, the island's erasure drawing inexorably closer. Memories frayed and slipped like grains of sand through their grasp, but in that moment of shared clarity, they found a fragile solace. The silence deepened around them, a vast and unyielding tide. Yet within it lingered the echo of human connection, a whispered defiance against the void. The island would soon vanish from all maps and minds, its existence erased like a forgotten dream. But for now, Evelyn and Lena held fast to the last memories, their voices a fragile ripple in the vast ocean of silence. As darkness closed in, they knew the inevitability of oblivion, yet refused to surrender without a final act of remembrance. The wind carried their whispered names across the empty shore, a fleeting testament to lives once lived, to stories once told, and to the unyielding human need to be remembered in the face of the salt and the silence. And as the first light of dawn approached, the island began its final disappearance, leaving behind only the faintest trace of a fading memory, a ghostly echo lost to the tides of time. But within that silence, a question remained. Would the story end here, or was there some fragment, some whisper that could survive beyond the erasing tide? The answer lingered, just beyond reach, as the last memories slipped quietly into the void. Evelyn Hart stood at the prow of the ship, the wind tugging at her dark hair, now streaked with grey and salt. The sea lay flat and cold, a mirror reflecting nothing but the empty sky above. The island, once so vivid with strange life and shifting shadows, had begun to dissolve, its edges blurring into the creeping mist that rolled in with unnatural silence. She glanced at the antique watch strapped tightly around her wrist, the seconds ticking down with a cruel finality. Midnight approached, the moment when the island would vanish from all maps, charts, and memory, a creeping erasure that had already stolen so much from them all. Around her, the ship's deck was hushed, the remaining survivors clinging to the fragile bonds that tethered them to sanity. Inside the cramped cabin, Lena Carr sat hunched over her notebook, the dim lantern casting flickering shadows across her pale face. Her fingers trembled as she scribbled the last fleeting names and words the team had clung to, a desperate attempt to anchor what was slipping away. The island's silence pressed against her like a living thing, a weight that threatened to crush the fragile threads of memory she so carefully preserved. Every whispered name was a defiance against oblivion, a fragile shield against the void. Captain Jonas Reed stood at the helm, his rugged face etched with lines of disbelief and rising panic. The compass in his hand spun wildly, as if the island's disappearance had torn a hole in the very fabric of reality. No chart, no digital record, no satellite image, nothing showed the island's existence anymore. It was as if it had never been. His hands clenched the wheel tighter, knuckles white, as the ship drifted toward the endless black horizon. Evelyn's voice broke the silence, calm but edged with urgency. We have to remember. We have to hold on to who we are. If the island can erase itself, it will try to erase us too. Lena looked up, eyes wide and haunted. I keep trying to name it, to speak the forgotten words. It slows the silence, but I don't know if it will be enough. The survivors gathered on the deck, a small, trembling circle of humanity against the engulfing dark. The last light of the island flickered like a dying ember, swallowed by the abyssal night. Voices fell to whispers, names uttered as prayers against the encroaching void. The salt air was thick with the weight of loss and the terror of being forgotten. Evelyn's mind raced back to the beginning, the excitement, the hope, the fierce determination to uncover the island's secrets. Now, all that remained was a haunting silence, the echo of forgotten names dissolving into the tide. She gripped the railing, feeling the chill seep into her bones, and whispered a vow to the night, to survive, to remember, to resist the erasure. As the clock struck midnight, a final wave of stillness swept over the ship. The island was no longer there. No trace remained on any map or memory beyond their fragile minds. The world outside would never know they had been, and soon even they might forget. The silence deepened, absolute and terrifying. But in that silence, Evelyn found a flicker, a stubborn ember of defiance. The battle was not over. As long as they breathed, as long as they named, the island's vanishing point would not be the end. And somewhere beneath the waves and the silence, the tide waited to return. The night hummed with a quiet intensity. The survivors moved like ghosts, shadows among shadows, their faces drawn and pale. Captain Reed's voice was hoarse as he called out, "All hands, prepare to weigh anchor. We leave at first light." Evelyn nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon where the blackness swallowed the last flicker of the island's form. "We'll carry it with us," she whispered, "in memory, in names, in silence." Lena's lips moved in a silent chant, a litany of lost words and forgotten names. She traced the lines of an ancient script in the air, a fragile bridge between existence and oblivion. The ship's engines groaned to life, breaking the eerie stillness. As they pulled away, the water closed behind them, erasing the island as if it had never been. The world beyond waited and changed, unaware and forgetful. But the survivors knew the truth. The salt and the silence had claimed their home, their past, and threatened their very selves. And as the darkness stretched before them, they faced the vast unknown, where memory was a fragile island in a sea of oblivion. Evelyn clasped Lena's hand, her voice steady despite the fear. "We are still here, for now." The vanishing point was not the end. It was a beginning shrouded in silence, waiting for the next tide. Outside, the ocean whispered secrets in waves that no one could hear. The island had vanished, but its story lingered silent, haunting, and eternal.